Where do we go from here, Mr. Bolton?
Well, I think the clear outcome of this discussion is that the ceasefire is very much in jeopardy, and it's very hard to predict what's going to happen next.
And that means at this point, however, when the president says the ceasefire, as far as he's concerned, is over, it means what? A return to hostilities over the next 24 hours? Is this a warning shot or perhaps a declaration that hostilities are back on? How do you read it?
It's impossible to read what Trump means. He did say at one point that he was giving advance warning that that Iran would be hit very hard tonight. I mean, that could mean going after a few selected targets. The fact is, the Iranians are counting on Trump not to launch a general warfare again because he's worried about the upcoming November elections.
Okay, but at this point, it seems to me there are two tracks here. One is the Strait of Hormuz. He's disappointed that there are what seems to be minor strikes on vessels, so he cannot get the oil out. And then there's a question of the nuclear weapon, and he said that still stands. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. So ultimately, how is the president going to ensure that that happens?
Well, personally, I don't think there is any way to ensure they don't get nuclear weapons until you change the regime. That has been the problem for the last 40 years as Iran has pursued nuclear weapons. I think the issue with the Gulf is more serious because while Iran was shipping its oil out, the Gulf Arabs were not. And now the president has put the sanctions back on Iran, which is significant. Oil prices have gone up 5% today in the spot market. So they're reacting very quickly to news that indeed hostilities might begin again.
And the president also said some very colorful language. He said these people are scum, they're liars, they say one thing and do another. Is that surprising to anyone?
No, this is typical Trump. You know, a few months ago, it's hard to keep all this straight, but he said he had achieved regime change in Iran. The previous leaders had been eliminated, and he now had this wonderful group of people that he was dealing with. So he will say anything at any time, and what he may have said in the past that he's contradicting simply doesn't bother him.
But at this point, he also seems to be admitting in a way that he was tricked by them. I mean, he said it to the press very clearly. He said these people are cuckoo. They say one thing in private and then the complete opposite. So he was conned?
Well, in fact, that's correct. I mean, the negotiators he has working on this, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, don't know anything about Iran, don't know anything about nuclear weapons. Other than that, what could go wrong?
Well, many things at this point. As you say, the oil market is reacting very heavily to it. But just to move into NATO itself, there is a joint declaration. The allies also say they commit to Article 5, a message clear from the U.S. However, the Europeans will have to take care of their security. Overall, was this a good NATO summit or just the bare minimum?
Well, I think the final statement that was agreed to unanimously is a good statement, and I think it does advance a lot of objectives. I think, frankly, the outcome for Ukraine, maybe not everything that Zelensky may have wanted, but still, nonetheless, very positive. If you leave Trump's critical remarks of Spain and a few other things that he said aside, I think this turns out to be positive for NATO. It's interesting, though, that there's no mention in the final statement of the 2027 NATO summit, which had been scheduled for Tirana, the capital of Albania. Frankly, it would not be a bad thing for NATO not to have a summit next year. Why roll the dice again?
What do you mean by that? Because Mark Rutte said it will happen in Albania, but didn't give a date. Why would it be good to not have a NATO summit?
Well, number one, you don't need a NATO summit every year. If you look at the history of the alliance, sometimes they're once every 2 years, once every 3 years. In recent years, it's been every year, but there's no requirement for that. Who knows what Donald Trump's mood will be a year from now at some unspecified date. If you skipped a year or two, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
And, sir, I want to ask you just a final question on this point. As you said, he lashed at the Spanish. You say they're not a team player. And he also said when it comes to Denmark, they're not taking care of Greenland. He also repeated it should be, quote, under the control of the United States. You know the man one-on-one. Is this a fixation or does he really mean business? By the end of his term, Greenland will be controlled by the U.S.
No, he's trolling people, as they say. In the first term, I was in his office once. He was dictating a tweet, and he told the person typing the tweet, capitalize all the letters in that last sentence, which a lot of people drives them. It just is very very distracting for people. And he turned and said to me, "Do you know why I just said that?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Because it drives them crazy." So why does he talk about taking Greenland? Because it drives them crazy. That's what it's about.
So it's a provocation. Well, Mr. Bolton, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews as always.